All right, good evening, folks. Thank you for joining us. My name is Chris Matthews. I'm chair of the Social Democratic Caucus, which is a political action committee here in the first Plymouth and Norfolk district, which is represented right now by Senator Patrick O'Connor. It goes from Weymouth down to Duxbury. It includes Weymouth, Hingham, Cohasset, Hull, Hingham, Duxbury, Norwell, Cohasset, Marshfield. I think I got all 8 there. Really grateful to both Jen Robinson of Moms Demand Action and James Byrne of the Hingham DTC for joining us tonight. A lot of you joined us for our forum on the House gun reform legislation back in October. It was on October 18th. And the vote was on, I believe, the following day in the House, and it passed the House. And the Senate, just this past Thursday, came out with their own version of the legislation, which is going to be the focus tonight. For those of you that did attend our previous forum, we will there's going to be some repeated information. We're just going to run through very quickly what was in the House bill, but that's going to be very brief. And then the focus tonight is going to be on the Senate bill and how to, effectively articulate to your senator whether your support for the bill and what you support within the bill. The October 18th meeting. Shortly afterward, since the October 18th meeting, I just wanted to highlight, we've had mass shootings the following week. 7 days later was the shooting in Lewiston where 19 lives were lost. We had the Perry High School shooting at the beginning of this month. Gun violence has continued on and on. And, there's been 9 school or campus shootings since that October 18th forum, including one that happened in Worcester, at Worcester State University. So it's all around us. And I just wanted to begin tonight by highlighting 2 incidences that happened on the South Shore, because it's important for us to recognize that this stuff happens here. This is why we're focused on this. This is why it's so important to get this legislation passed in the Senate and to get the final version of the bill passed in both the House and the Senate. And it's going to take all of us advocating for that to happen. So I just wanted to play 2 clips. One took place, I believe, the day after the House voted in favor of the gun reform legislation on the House side, and then one was a couple of weeks after. So I just want to highlight what happened in Kingston and what happened in Wareham, both instances involving ghost guns, and one involving 3D printing, and 2 things that are going to be regulated under both the House and the Senate bill. So we're going to get started with that. Going to be brief, and then we're going to go straight into Jen Robinson's presentation. And there's no sound on that video. Sorry about that.
Right now at 11, a Wareham man charged with murdering his father, and investigators say he used an untraceable ghost gun to kill him. And it's those types of weapons the state wants to ban. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Chris Tanaka. Right now, lawmakers are wrestling with dozens of bills to tighten some of the toughest gun laws in the country. We want to get straight to Tammy Mutasa, who's live tonight at the State House. Tammy?
Chris, tonight some lawmakers say these ghost guns have become a major public safety problem, and their push to crack down comes as a son is accused of shooting his own father with a ghost gun just last night.
She heard screaming and could make out the words, "I think I killed my father."
Robert Gomes III faced a judge charged with shooting his own father to death. Police say Gomes even called 911 after the shooting. Then detectives found 61-year-old Robert Gomes Jr. dead on their back porch in Wareham. Prosecutors say the son had used a ghost gun to kill his dad.
This is a firearm that had no serial number, was ordered offline, is essentially a ghost gun.
The tragic shooting happened as state lawmakers are pushing to crack down on those untraceable ghost guns.
Ghost guns are just as deadly as a gun that is bought from a licensed gun dealer.
On Tuesday, House and Senate leaders heard testimony on 56 firearms bills, including one the House passed that would ban having or making ghost guns without a federal firearms license. Representative Linsky hopes the Senate will take up the ghost gun bill as it looks to come up with its own gun reforms next year.
Probably the most significant public safety issue facing our police today. A majority of the crime guns that are currently recovered in Boston and in Springfield and in some other urban communities are in fact ghost guns.
If they're prohibited people in possession of gun parts, Hammer them. Let's go get them.
And even Second Amendment advocates, like the executive director of Gun Owners Action League, agree it's time for reform, especially going after criminals.
There's no such thing as a ghost gun with lawful gun owners. Because if we build a gun, which we're entitled to, we report it. You have to.
So that was Wareham, and then hopefully this video in Kingston, which was the day after the vote, will play with audio, and it's not going to. So, because I turned the volume down.
Live in Kingston tonight, the suspect, of course, appeared in court there today. Louisa, he had more than just 3D parts.
Well, first, Chris and Lisa, he's not formally charged with using a 3D printer to produce gun parts because that's not illegal in Massachusetts right now. He is charged with illegal possession of an AR-style rifle and ammunition because he has a criminal record. And this comes as lawmakers and some law enforcement want to tighten restrictions on so-called ghost guns so they don't get in the wrong hands.
Attorney Sheehan, what date, please, for a 58A hearing?
34-year-old Charles Santos shook his head as he was placed in handcuffs in a Plymouth courtroom, ordered to spend the next few days in jail before a hearing to decide if he's dangerous.
This piece right here, which has the trigger assembly and a serial number on the other side, that's the part that you would technically need an LTC for, to purchase, to register. Everything else you can effectively buy online.
But Kingston Police Lieutenant Michael Scovera, who showed us Santos's at-home assembled AR-style rifle and his 3D printed gun parts, says Santos certainly had the potential to be dangerous. Santos has a criminal history and is not permitted to have guns.
We didn't want the stuff to be out there any longer than it already was. So this wire feeds into this little printer thing here, and then this moves, and this comes up and down, and it prints.
Police seized this 3D printer, parts, the gun, and a tactical vest from Santos's Kingston home on Sunday after a tip.
That individual was also able to provide us with a video that showed Mr. Santos in the possession of a pistol.
Santos was also in possession of illegal steroids. His arrest comes as more police say they're encountering so-called ghost guns. Last year, Boston police recovered 695 guns used in crimes. 104 of them were ghost guns. In October, the Massachusetts House of Representatives passed a bill that would require a license to have some parts of ghost guns. It's now in the hands of the Senate. Lieutenant Scovera is sure of one thing.
No matter what, I don't think there should be a way that a prohibited person gets a hold of firearms or firearms parts, right? It's just how do we control that to allow law-abiding citizens their rights and not allow prohibited persons from having that.
All right, so I just wanted to play those two clips to just show this is happening in our backyard. It also gives us kind of a better idea. We talk a lot about ghost guns and 3D printing, and it was a good opportunity to see what that looks like. Before I turn it over to our presenters, this will be the last time you have to hear from me tonight. Just quickly on housekeeping, if you have questions, we're going to do a Q&A at the end. If you're watching on YouTube, you can ask right in the video chat. If you're on Facebook, whether you're watching on the SSDC page or on the Marshfield Dems page, you can make a comment on the video, and that will come through as a question, and we'll be able to put it up on the screen. If you're watching on our website, you can click the YouTube link and ask questions there on Facebook, or you can send us an email. Our email is ssdc for Social Democratic Caucus, ssdc1976@gmail.com. And that's scrolling along the bottom as well. So that's enough for me. I am very excited to introduce Jen Robinson, who not only is a Scituate resident, but is the Massachusetts co-lead for Moms Demand Action and is here on behalf of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America tonight. So Jen, it's all yours.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me back again. The last time I was here was right before the House went for a vote on their bill. And now this Thursday, the Senate is going to be voting on their bill, which is technically an amendment. But okay, here we go. So I just thought I would start by giving a little bit of background. So Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, our Massachusetts chapter, our priorities have been, and this is since 2019, and actually probably even prior to that, ghost guns, which we heard about, collecting crime gun data and reporting so that our lawmakers actually have the data to make good legislation, firearm industry accountability, promoting safe firearm storage, codifying a list of sensitive places. This actually comes out of the Supreme Court Bruin decision, and then also live fire training. So these are things that we have been talking about and advocating for at least 3 legislative sessions. And all of these things were in the House bill, and the House bill had this and a lot more. It was about 149 pages. It was quite dense and covered a lot. So those are the things that we've always advocated for. These were all in the House bill. And now I'll talk about what is in the Senate bill. And this is not, just so you know, because I'm not an expert on all of this, this is what we at Moms Demand Action in Every Town have been advocating for. So these are kind of the highlights for us, but there is more to the bill than just what I'm presenting tonight. So like I did in the presentation that I did on the House bill, I'm just putting some statistics in so we can see how gun violence affects Massachusetts, and then what the Senate bill, which is S-2572, how it addresses it. So 65% of all homicides in Massachusetts do involve a gun, and 111 people die by gun homicide every year. So this particular bill addresses this by ensuring a consistency in all forms of orders of protection. And so this hits on domestic violence and kind of boyfriend loopholes. And so it's expanding who a court can order to turn in their gun. So it can be a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a significant other. This also addresses the next point. It also addresses this, which is having a biennial report analyzing reporting on firearm trace data, and using this data to help the legislators create future gun violence prevention measures. And it's also good for the chief of police and the state police. So those are 2 things that we have always talked about. So there's a 75% increase in the seizure of ghost guns in Massachusetts. And I know James is going to be talking about this, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail. But this bill, the Senate bill, will require all firearms that are manufactured, assembled, possessed, purchased, transferred into our state to be serialized. It also will make it unlawful to use a 3-dimensional printer or a computer to manufacture or assemble any firearm. And in particular, it also names unfinished frames or receivers, because these are the pieces that can be made on a 3D printer and not have a serial number on it. So to make these, you need to have a valid license to manufacture firearms under this Senate bill. It would also be, oops, sorry for the typo, it would also be unlawful to sell a firearm that has any unserialized parts. So I think that's also an important addition. So this next stat, as of, this was what we had from the state of 2022, over half of the police departments in Massachusetts had not inspected any gun dealers in their jurisdiction since at least 2017. Now the House bill actually moved the inspections over to the state police. This is slightly different, where it's strengthening the dealer licensing standards and then having training for law enforcement. It tasks the Massachusetts State Police with inspections if the local jurisdiction, I think, kind of raises their hand and says, we cannot carry out the inspections. So it is slightly different. And this, again, is really a direct result of the old mill in Littleton that had just a ton of dealers. And what was happening there was people could go to one dealer and get a part, go to another dealer, and it was kind of running amok. And the Globe did, if you're looking for more information on that, the Globe did a really good piece on it. Another thing that we're always concerned with is suicides. 21% of all suicides in Massachusetts do involve a gun. 55% of all mass gun deaths are suicide by firearm. And so this bill addresses this by expanding categories of people eligible to petition the courts for an extreme risk protection order, ERPO, or also known as a red flag law. So this bill includes healthcare providers. Again, it's not as broad as the House bill. I think what we're finding with the Senate bill is that there's a more narrow focus, and what they have said is that they're really looking to an eye of making sure that there are no lawsuits. So this bill will also do some things that, again, the House bill would do. It will establish a commission to study the funding structure for violence prevention services. Again, we at Moms always say the people closest to the pain are closest to the problem and are closest to the solution. It would prohibit firearms in sensitive places such as government buildings. It would establish a commission to study and report on the feasibility and benefits of microstamping and personalized handgun technology, which is something that the House bill did as well. And this bill, it would make it illegal to design, advertise, market, or sell a firearm to people under the age of 18. And this gets to industry accountability. So it does some things that are a little bit different. I think that is my last slide. The only other thing that I wanted to mention is there are quite a few amendments that were filed yesterday. Two that we are looking at are 19, which is a safe storage initiative by Senator Jason Lewis, because if you'll notice, this bill does not have anything about promoting safe storage of firearms. Senator Lewis's bill would require that public school systems send home at least once a year information to parents about what Massachusetts laws are for safe storage. And it would go directly to the parents. It would not come home like in a backpack. It would be a communication. Like I know in Situate they do, I don't even remember anymore, but there's like some more, there's all these different ones that it goes straight to parents. So that's what Senator Lewis's amendment would do. The other one that we are tracking is Amendment 46, which would require live firearm training, which is noticeably absent from this bill. And I think it's a very much a common sense addition that if you are going to learn, or if you're going to carry a handgun, you should learn in real time how to handle it, much like you have to drive a car before you are handed the keys and a license. So that is my overview of the Senate bill.
All right. Thank you so much, Jen. We're going to have Jen back on for the Q&A after James speaks. Just again, housekeeping, if you have questions, you can put them on YouTube in the video chat. You can put them on Facebook on the video chat, or you can email them to us, ssdc1976@gmail.com. It's also been brought to my attention that folks that click the YouTube link might actually be starting from the beginning, which is great. So it means that you haven't missed anything, but it also means you might be a little behind. So as questions come to you, throw them in the chat. And then that way, if we're already done by the time you get to the Q&A, we'll be able to answer your questions, and you'll be able to see those answers, and everybody else will benefit from them as well. So Jen, I'm going to take you off the screen if I can. There we go. And I'm going to add James on. James Byrne is the former legal counsel for the House Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security. He did a lot of work on the House version of the bill, and he's now dealing with these issues every day as a prosecutor. So James, I'm going to toss it over to you and take myself off the screen, and then we'll do our Q&A after.
Thank you, Chris, and I appreciate the introduction, and thank you, Jen, for your presentation. Like Chris said, I'm the former legal counsel for the Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security for the House of Representatives. I worked on researching, drafting, and redrafting some of the bills that have been incorporated this session into the House's omnibus gun bill. Last session, some of the bills that now make up the House version of the bill were large priorities for Chair Gonzalez, and that's Representative Carlos Gonzalez of Springfield. Those bills being an act relative to ghost guns and 3D printed firearms, an act relative to tracking and tracing illegal firearms, and a few others. towards the end of last session, I'm sure you all remember that the the Supreme Court released the Bruen decision, which overturned the state of New York's firearm licensure process, which is very, very similar to ours. That kind of derailed the Public Safety Committee's efforts to get a gun bill. I think we were hoping for the ghost gun bill to make it to the floor that session. And unfortunately, the Judiciary Committee had to step in and address some of the issues in our licensing process in Massachusetts to be in compliance with the Supreme Court ruling in Bruen. And unfortunately, towards the end of the session, it was kind of like putting 12 pounds of flour in a 10-pound bag. And now we have the omnibus bill that's been passed in the House today. Some things I wanted to highlight in the omnibus House bill were the portion that addressed ghost guns. I can tell you my current role, where I'm an assistant district attorney in the Dorchester Court. Ghost guns are a massive problem. We see a lot of arrests where when they describe the firearm that's recovered, it's described as having no serial number or even directly described as a ghost gun. It's much more frequent than I would have guessed when I was working in the legislature. Tracking and trace, the portion that addresses tracking and tracing illegal firearms. This is a bill that Rep. Gonzalez actually filed and that went to the committee that he chaired. It's largely based on a New York policy that was instituted by their attorney general, in which they were cultivating statewide data on where crime guns were coming from to better inform their policies about how to keep crime guns off the street. I was not so involved with drafting or researching anything involving safe storage or sensitive places, though I know that towards that the beginning of this cycle, if I remember correctly, Representative Linsky filed a bill on that matter. I know one of the biggest things that I was excited about in the bill was the Legislative Commission to study what sort of policy action our legislature can take to help foster the growth of the smart gun industry. If anybody is interested in kind of learning more about gun policy, I would say that in addition to ghost guns and live fire training and safe storage, doing some Google research about what a smart gun is and what kind of developments there have been on smart guns is a really, really interesting place to start. Some of the technologies that we use every day, Bluetooth or biometrics in our phone, they're employing those to ensure that a gun that's your gun can really only be fired by you. It's really, really cool stuff, really interesting stuff. And it's something that the gun manufacturing industry has been pushing back on. As everybody knows, there is Smith & Wesson here in Massachusetts, very well-known, very prominent gun manufacturer. And I know that Chair Gonzalez is hoping that the legislature takes action to try to foster the growth of the smart gun industry in Massachusetts to make a safer firearm. Regarding the Senate bill, of course, all the benchmarks for ghost guns are there, that it be imprinted that any gun that someone who's properly licensed to carry, that it be imprinted with a serial number, making it unlawful to use a 3D printer to manufacture or assemble a firearm unless you're a licensed manufacturer, making it unlawful to sell unserialized parts. These are all extremely important. They're also present in the House bill. I just wanted to highlight how important that is, especially working together with the elements of the bill that are geared towards tracking and tracing illegal firearms. Cutting down on untraceable firearms doesn't just make our streets directly safer, it also makes it easier for law enforcement to track where crimes are coming from and better inform their enforcement strategies and better inform our policy strategies to to keep everybody safe. I also wanted to touch on amendments, and I know that generally Senator O'Connor, it's my understanding, is generally supportive of the bill. Our state senator here on the South Shore, who is of course a Republican, and I may get the number wrong, so don't quote me on this, but I think it's Amendment 57 that he filed. It would create a legislative commission to study ghost gun mills or ghost gun factories. Another thing that I'd really encourage people to Google: ghost gun factory, ghost gun mill, and just throw Massachusetts or Boston or Springfield at the end of your search. Really alarming stuff. There's one in Springfield. I think they had enough parts there that were 3D printed or ordered online, perfectly legally ordered online, to assemble, I think it was 45 or 50 guns in one apartment. They found another one, I think it was about a year ago in Dorchester. It's a really serious problem, and it really emphasizes how much the technology is outpacing the policies. Another area that I wanted to address, and I wanted to kind of bring to everybody's attention, and of course, love to encourage people to Google some of this stuff. SEER switches. I believe the Senate bill also addresses SEER switches. Currently, if somebody's arrested with a firearm that has a SEER switch, well, if I could back up, SEER switch is a small piece about that big that you can affix to the back of a firearm, like a Glock or a semi-automatic pistol, and it interrupts the firing mechanism and allows it to be fired fully automatic. So if you squeeze the trigger once, it's not one bullet coming out, it's multiple. It's extremely dangerous for a couple of reasons. The first being that if it's coupled with a high capacity magazine where somebody can have over 20 rounds in that magazine, that's a lot of live rounds of ammunition being shot at once. Additionally, because of a semi-automatic pistol being something that's held in one hand, once you're squeezing that trigger, you have very little control over where you're firing that gun. So the fact that the bill addresses those is excellent. Overall, both of these bills are what I would consider to be a really, really great start to addressing some of the issues that remain unaddressed here in the Commonwealth, where, of course, we have really strong gun laws. It's something that I'm really proud of, and I think we should all be really proud of. My chief criticism of both bill, it's something that can be shared with really any piece of legislation, I think, is that there's certainly more that can be done. I also think that part of that issue is because when we, as Democrats, view a bill as a gun bill, we tend to view it as something that it directly addresses accessibility and availability of firearms. But I think there's a lot more that we can do to address these issues. For instance, making investments in expanding accessibility to mental health treatment, making investments in after-school programs in high crime areas, and empowering law enforcement to employ violence disruption strategies to get the very few people who are perpetuating gun violence in high crime areas off the street are all paramount in addressing this issue. And I also wanted to just very quickly thank Chris Matthews and John Bowes and the South Shore Democratic Caucus for having me. It's a real passion area for me, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak on it. So thank you, Chris.
You better get off that wall, get down on it. To get right there, you can't sit down on it like a lot.
Sorry, I was trying to. I looked up a SEER switch and was trying to show it, and I didn't realize it was going to play immediately. I just wanted to put it up because it's horrifying. If that's okay, James.
Oh, of course, yeah. No, that was a great song too. So.
So this is this gentleman demonstrating the SEER switch, and this is what terrified me. And so that's just something that they can add on, and that's very scary.
Yeah, and if I can jump in on that, today at the court where I work, there was a hearing on a matter that will likely be indicted, and it's somebody who was arrested with a gun like that and a SEER switch and extended magazine, and basically those are, people are just 3D printing them. one of the notable things that was mentioned during the hearing was defense counsel called it a novel piece of technology, meaning like it's new and interesting or whatever. And the response from the Commonwealth is that, unfortunately for our community, it's not a novel piece of technology. They're everywhere. So it's definitely something that needs to be addressed.
Great. Thank you so much. So we do have a question in the chat. Jen, I'm going to bring you back in, and I'm going to remove myself. But let me put this up on the screen. So David Allen Ross asked, any consideration being given to require liability insurance for gun owners?
That is not in either bill, to the best of my knowledge. I don't think that they're doing that.
I haven't heard of anything like that either.
All right. So we don't have a ton of questions in the chat. I'm going to check the email in a second, so we'll see if there's any over there. But while I do that, would both of you be willing to, James, I know you had a lot of interactions with the gun lobby, I guess we'd call it GOAL, the Gun Owners Action League, during your time writing the bill. Jen, I know you've certainly encountered them on lobby days on the Hill. So I was wondering if you could lend some insight. We saw all the signs for the House docket, whatever those signs were all over the place. They certainly do a good job of reaching out to their members. I went to GOAL's website today, and it's just like stream of consciousness. The world is ending. Like, they're taking your guns. It's just, they're very effective at their messaging. But I was just wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about what the gun lobby is like here in Massachusetts. And then James, I know when we talked about the House bill, you had some great tips on how we can approach our elected officials and kind of speak in an informed way. So I'm going to go track down some additional questions, and I'll toss it over to both of you.
Who wants to take on GOAL? Do you want to do that, James?
I can start. I can start on GOAL. I had several meetings with GOAL, and I think I'm sure, Jen, you've experienced GOAL, and the guy who was featured in that very brief clip at the beginning of the meeting was Jim Wallace. Big Jim, as he likes to be called. So my first meeting with Jim Wallace lasted, I think, like 2 hours. And I think that clip really, to me, kind of gives you an interesting, good idea of who he is at a surface level. Generally a nice guy, affable. You can have a conversation with him, all that stuff. But I mean, really pretty typical talking points for what you would expect from a gun lobbyist. I think our meeting, we discussed the fact that the State House is, in his opinion, the most unsafe building in the Commonwealth because nobody can bring guns in here. He, kind of pointed out to us that the state police that are there, they're not there for us. They're there for the governor, which I found a little weird. But when we kind of got down to it, I thought that him and his counsel, or GOAL's counsel, whose name I can't remember, I thought they generally were pretty professional in advocating their policy positions. And when we pushed back, they seemed receptive to our ideas and everything, and to research we had done. But, generally it kind of left the meeting and went right to their base and kind of said what they wanted. I think when dealing with not just like the gun lobby, but dealing with somebody in your life who you care about or who you encounter, who's very, very pro-gun, if you feel compelled to talk about these things, I think being informed about the basics is really important. I think that people in our meetings, if they referred to like a magazine as a clip or a round of ammunition as a bullet, Jim and the people the people he brought to the meeting, immediately that person had no credibility with them. And it's so like knowing some basic stuff like that, and when you're speaking to somebody who disagrees with you on these issues, or advocating to your elected rep or senator, I think goes a long way. It's my understanding that I think Jim was a little more abrasive with activists than he is with people who are staffers in the State House. So I'll let Jen take it from there.
I wouldn't. He's not really that abrasive to us. He disdains us. So you could just kind of get used to that. I think the difference. I think your advice about knowing what you're talking about, even just at a basic level, is really important. I also think, getting out, they call themselves 2A. The 2A crowd, they're very passionate, and this is what brings them out and gets them going. And the challenge that we have with Moms Demand Action, and if you've heard of the Massachusetts Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence, they as well, you have a hard time getting people to write to your senators or your representatives because it's not usually the single most pressing issue. So what we see time and again is if there's unfortunately a shooting, membership will spike, people will demand meetings, but then when it comes to crunch time, like now, we're seriously in crunch time. If you want to see changes to our laws around this issue, now is the time to write Senator O'Connor, write your representative. Representative Kearney was not there for the vote, but he would not have voted for this bill. This is the time to make yourselves heard between now and July, again and again and again, because we heard time and again that the gun lobby and their supporters completely outmanned us on reaching out. And that's just because we care, but we don't get outraged. And with any of this legislation, the 2A folks basically hear we're taking your guns away and we're putting more pressure on law-abiding gun owners. And typically their solution, it's whataboutism. So, well, what about mental health? What about this? They harken back to longer prison terms and locking, people up, where we don't necessarily agree with that. And the Mass Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence definitely does not agree with that. So it's tough. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, and if I could add, I think when you're advocating to your representatives and your senators, don't be afraid to let your experiences informed how you do that. You don't have to do it the exact way that people are, kind of telling you to. For instance, like if you have a legal background and you're, and an elected official who represents your area has offered as a reason to not support a bill, oh, well, what if someone is, going through somewhere with baggage or like a parcel or something and doesn't know what's in there and they could be arrested. Well, if you have that background, you can tell them, oh, you don't have to worry about that. It's part of possessing something is knowingly being able to exert control over that object. So that's a non-issue. You don't have to worry about that. So I think that's important to keep in mind. And then I also wanted to point out something that I thought Jen mentioned that's really true. These people are the 2A advocates are mobilized like so easily. This might be, I don't want this to sound callous or crass or anything, but if you're a hobbyist and you enjoy, or a hunter and you enjoy, shooting and going to the range or hunting or whatever, and you own guns, I mean, that's all well and good to me. But basically what the thing is to you is a recreational instrument. It's a toy. So look how worked up these people get over policies, safety-based policies, when they think they're going to lose their thing that they enjoy in their leisure time. I mean, for us, this is like a physical safety thing. People are dying because these things are available. We should be the ones who are worked up into a tizzy like that, and mobilized like that, right? So I think that's something two things to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Chris says, how can we help assist Moms Demand Action in their mission? I mean, I think right now we have a lot of priorities, but we're here talking about legislation. I think this group, if everybody can write and or call, Senator O'Connor has always been an ally. We had a Moms Demand Action meeting in Scituate right after the Uvalde shooting down in Texas, and he spoke at it. He has come to a lot of our different meetings, and in that first slide, I mentioned what our priorities have been for the last 3 legislative cycles, and those are his priorities as well. So he is he really is, he's on our side. I cannot say the same for Representative Kearney, and I don't know about other representatives. Joan Machino used to be my rep, and she supported a lot of what we did. So I think it's, going to their office hours, letting them know that it's important. If you can't go to their office hours, just write an email from the heart. If you have, I don't mean to sound callous, because if there's anybody here who is a survivor of gun violence, this can be a very hard ask. But if you tell your story on why, how gun violence has affected you or your family, it really makes an impact. And I'm sure, James, you've sat in some of those meetings too. I've sat in those meetings where survivors tell their stories. And, the other thing I want to say is I've also sat in on a lot of hearings. And actually that news clip showed the House hearing. And you don't have to be an expert on this. Nobody expects you to be an expert. So you just speak from, your heart on what is important to you and let them know.
Great, thank you. And I just want to say, as someone who works in a legislative office, make those calls, send those emails. They do matter. I work with Senator O'Connor's office on constituent services between the state and federal. His staff will listen and record your opinion, and it's important to reach out to not only the senator but your rep as well, because I think, Jen, we're thinking the Senate might vote as soon as this week, but then it's going to go to conference, and there'll be another vote in the House and the Senate. So. Just because the vote already happened in the House doesn't mean that the time to stop, the time to reach out to our state House members is over. I do know all of the Democrats in our district, in our 8-town district that did vote in favor of the legislation. So Rep. Kearney was not there to vote, and then Representative DeCoste voted against it. I'm sure very happily and strongly voted against it.
Point, if I can just interject, so it will go to conference, and we've been told that it's most likely going to go all the way up to the July 31st deadline, and so hopefully nothing happens that derails it. But for us with Moms Demand Action, we're going to have lots of calls to action. We're going to the chambers on Thursday at 1:00 in our red shirts to watch. So that they know that we are there. We are probably going to have an advocacy day probably in May while the conference is still there. Again, showing up in our shirts, meeting with everybody. So, if that's something that you want to get plugged into, you can text MA to 64433, or you can download our app, which is called Demand Action, and put in you want to know what's going on within a 25-50 mile radius, and anytime you go on the app, you'll see what we're doing.
What was that number again, Jen? Text MA to
64433.
All right, magic on the screen.
That's actually going to take you to a landing page that will give you a digital action to send a letter to your state reps, to your senator. It's already pre-populated. So that takes you to a really easy action. The one thing I will say is, if you have 5 minutes, send your own email. It's more powerful than these digital actions. But if you want, texting MA gets you into the mom system, and then you'll know what's coming up in the future.
Great. I just got a great question in via email, and I think we answered it. But the question was, what's the take on Senator O'Connor's position? Would it do any good to contact him? And I think we answered that absolutely. No matter what, reach out, let him know that you support it. Because whether or not he's going to vote for it, I don't know personally, but if he does vote for it, he's going to need to back up that decision when the people on his side of the aisle are upset about it. So absolutely reach out. I'm going to reach out to Representative DeCoste. I know he's probably not looking for my opinion, but I'm definitely going to let him know. And I encourage everyone to do the same. We shouldn't be afraid of people because they are Republicans. There are elected representatives. Reaching out to them does not mean that we have to vote for them. Certainly doesn't mean we have to vote for them, but it is important, in the 2 years that they're representing us, to make sure that they have our opinions. So I'm going to give one last opportunity. If anybody has questions, you can toss them in the comments box, send them to that ssdc1976@gmail.com. But absent any more questions, I think we're going to begin to wrap up. James, Jen, I don't know if you have anything that you want to say to wrap up, or I think we've covered a lot, and this has been fantastic. And I can't thank both of you enough. I think I emailed Jen on Thursday night or Friday. And James, you made the mistake of being in my line of sight on Saturday. So this came together very quickly, and just very grateful to everyone that joined us tonight. And especially the folks who were with us on Saturday. I know asking you to come on Saturday and then do this tonight is a lot. So we'll give you a break for a little bit. But thank you so much, Jen. John Bose is shaking his head at me. No, we're not giving anybody a break because it's an election year. So
Friday and Saturday.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
This is going to be available. We're going to make sure that everybody gets this video that attended and it's on our list so they can watch the recording and share it. We'll also include some information about the actions you can take. We'll have some more information about Moms Demand. I'm going to plug our next SSTC event. James and John, I'll let you escape the screen. Our next SSTC event is going to be towards the end of February. We're going to be doing a forum on reproductive rights and kind of where we are in Massachusetts and what the landscape looks like in the rest of the country as well, and how things have changed since Roe fell, since the Dobbs decision. So looking forward to that. We'll have more information. We actually have somebody that's flying in to visit family, and it's an expert in the field. So we're just looking to secure a room, and we'll also be streaming. Would also love some feedback on this platform. This is the first time we've used it for an SSDC event. Normally we'd be on Zoom, but we wanted to try something a little higher quality. So we will have a hybrid event on reproductive rights, and we're going to close out the gun event, and I'm going to toss it over to John Bose, because if you've ever been to a South Shore Democratic Caucus event or any Democratic event on the South Shore, you can't get out without John Bose taking over and telling you what you need to do next. So here's John.
Thank you, Chris. We've got two events coming up. So we've got a postcard party on Friday, and then we have a candidates forum on Saturday. Postcard party is at the Panera Bread in Hanover at 6 o'clock. And then the candidates forum is 12:30 at the Marshfield Public Library. We will be sharing in the comment section more information, but you can visit mdtc.blog/get-involved for a full list of all those events. So once again, that's mdtc.blog/get-involved. Chris, this was an awesome event. Great job.
Thanks, John. All right, folks, don't forget to vote on the March 5th primary if we don't see you before then. And don't forget to check off all the DTC. You're listening to me on John's mic. Sorry about that. Don't forget to check all the DTC members, because they're the engine that get our elected officials in office and allow us to push our values through the state. So thank you all so much for joining us. Stream will be available on our YouTube page, on our Facebook page, and on the Marshfield DTC Facebook page. And expect an email with actions to follow up after this. And thank you all, and have a good night.